Welcome to Behind the Tools. Here's Tradify CEO and your host, Michael Steckler.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Behind the Tools from Tradify. I'm Michael, your host, and I've got another great name, another person with a great name, Michael Chaplin from Tweed, who's joining us in Australia this week. Very excited about having you on board, Michael, so welcome to the podcast.
Morning.
And so, Michael, I guess before we dive in, you're based in Tweed Heads, and we have lots of listeners and viewers across the world who may not know where that is. So I'm going to do a little bit of geography and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's actually, I've read it's the one place in the world where you can sort of celebrate New Year twice by kind of crossing the road into two different time zones. Is that a fair?
That is correct, yeah. We are right on the New South Wales-Queensland border. There is contention to say we are the most eastern point, but there's some people further south of us in another famous town, Byron Bay, who believe they're the most eastern point of Australia.
I was going to reference Byron Bay. I maybe shouldn't. So to give everyone a sense of geography, it's kind of, you're nearer to Brisbane, I guess, is the nearest big city. And it's up on the Gold Coast, good surfing and all that good stuff. So on the border of sort of New South Wales and Queensland.
Yep, that's correct.
Great, cool. We appreciate having the show. Do you maybe want to start by giving everyone a brief overview of kind of your business and where you specialise?
Okay, so we try not to specialise too much in one sort of channel so that we can spread our risk, I suppose is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
We have a large portion of our business, I suppose, is commercial maintenance with shopping centre, golf club and fast food chains. We have another branch of our business which works in the manufacturing. So we work with a large supplier of food vans and mobile restaurant, which has done really well over the last 12 months. They're a great team to work with. And we also have our mums and dads, fans, lights, renovations, house rewires, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, great. And I think one of the things that was interesting when we sort of spoke to you before the show is that your business has grown a lot over the last few years from being a sole trader right through to having, I think you're up to now 5 employees. Do you want to maybe walk us through that journey and what drove that?
Okay, so I started my own business to have freedom so that I could work 4 days a week and have a 3-day weekend. We're still striving for that. It hasn't happened, which in a way is a good thing. What happened early on is I started as a sole trader. It was great. And then I actually got a thing called Ross River virus, which is a mosquito-borne illness which can affect you in various different ways. So I went from being able to complete a certain amount of work to not being able to complete that work. So I employed straight away and got someone in to help me out and to do the work that I couldn't do. And then with that, I kept selling, basically, being that salesman, being that person on the line. You've got to be, in my opinion, all aspects of your business when you're starting out, and it is hard to juggle. I come from a background of sales, electrical wholesaling. I worked my way through to management, and then decided that I wanted to be an electrician. So I went back and retrained.
Yeah. And
so I'd worked for various different people throughout the industry. I'd seen some things I wanted to do. I saw some things I didn't want to do. And I thought the best way to do that is work for myself.
Yeah. Great. So sorry to hear about the illness, but it sounds like you sort of came into this thinking that actually running the business and employing people was going to be the best way to get you to that position of that 3-day weekend. Are you getting a 2-day weekend?
No, I'm trying.
Yeah.
So what's happened now is I keep selling. I keep growing the business, and a big part of that is doing the basics. Turning up on time, contact with the customer, good contact, doing quality work and just not settling for second best. You know, my guys that work for me are really good efficient workers. They clean up. It's one of the biggest things. That's on our catchphrase at the end of our jobs. We clean up, and that gets us a lot of return and repeat business and referral work. So we've grown to 5. I was looking for another electrician. Now I'm actually looking for 2 electricians. We just have had a ton of work dumped on us, and I'm not really good at saying no. So, yeah,
that's probably why you've not got that 3-day weekend yet. I'm guessing.
That'd be exactly.
Yeah. Which is it's good. It's healthy. I mean, healthy from a business perspective at least. And then when you hired that first person, like, was that an electrician that you hired straight out the door, or an apprentice? How did you approach that?
No, fully qualified, mature guy. Actually, it was a good hire in the sense that he didn't last long, but he taught me some lessons. That hiring is one of the most important parts of the business. We have to do it right, otherwise it can cost us money, it can cost us time, it can create extra work it's just not paid for. It's not quoted for. It's so hire a bit slower. Have the time to make some decisions. Don't try and get to that desperate point before you hire, because you will make poor decisions, and your business will suffer. It'll suffer. Just straight out.
Hiring it has been an ongoing theme actually on this podcast around how to hire people. Mistakes that people have made, often with maybe their first apprentice or first employee who hasn't lasted for whatever reason, or hasn't been a cultural fit, all those types of things, and the damage that can cause reputationally. You talked about, your business brand and the impact that can have. Do you have a framework now that you work towards when you think about hiring people, in terms of how you approach them and how you decide what the right fit is? Yeah,
so we've got a couple of things that we do, and when I was in sort of corporate management and things like that, there were things that we did in HR then that more the HR department did, that it was all done for us. They did all the prerequisite work. So I've taken on a couple of little things, some tips I've learned through doing some training with different people. One of the things I've taken on is do a personality profile with each employee that gets shortlisted. Now, this is only for the shortlisted. This is only for the people who
when you get to the last stage.
I have also put in place video interviewing. So I have a series of questions. It's a little trick that's only come to us recently, that it just cuts out so much time. And it cuts out those people who aren't willing to go that extra mile to get a job and work for a quality company.
And so in terms of, and the reason for the video is, does that help you not have to have people who maybe are working somewhere else and have to travel, or what was the intention behind that?
The intention is to stop me from having to call that person and ask those questions and get into a conversation that veers off track. And I have 6 questions that are very focused, and they answer those questions. Quick 30-second answers, nothing major. And what that does is that allows me to get a feel for that person. You know, and all the guys out there know from experience, someone can have a great resume but interview badly, or someone can have a very poor resume that don't get through to that next stage, but they actually know what they're doing really well. I worked with a guy years ago who he wasn't the sharpest in the shed, but seriously, he was my favourite guy on the team to work with. He was just onto it. Every job was just cream to work with him. We were just bounced off each other really well. We always rolled to the next job and the next job and the next job. So, and that guy, I know for a fact, didn't interview well and didn't get top marks on his capstone and things like that. So, but that guy's very employable. I've actually tried to employ him 3 times now.
Oh, wow. And so, and is there any particular questions that you could share that identify or help you with him as an example, differentiate those types of people?
Yeah, one of the big ones is find out, ask the question of, why do you want to work for me? What sets you apart, and why do you want to work for me? So that makes sure that they have done some research, they've taken the time, it's not an answer that you can just sit there and fudge. You can actually see their eyes. You can see the mannerisms and things like that. If they're passionate about what they do, they're going to answer well. If they're not passionate, you'll pick it up like that. Language is one of those amazing things.
That's it's interesting you share that, because that has seemed to come up in different phraseology, but that sort of cultural fit and energy, and someone who actually wants I spoke to a builder in the last podcast, and he talked about, having to get up at 7 a.m. or be on site by 7 a.m. and trying to differentiate those people that said they would be happy to do that because they wanted the job, but actually in reality, if you dig a bit deeper, maybe they're not really up for doing that, 5 times a week, whatever that looks like. And then on the sort of personality profile, are you using like an online, like a Myers-Briggs or one of these sort of tools that are available to do that? How do you approach that?
Myers-Briggs is the one we use.
Yeah,
Myers-Briggs is it. It's free. They sit down. It takes like 10 minutes. They're not hard. They're not an intelligence test. It just makes sure that person's going to fit in with your team.
Yeah,
I want team players. I don't want people who work as individuals or who can't work in teams.
Yeah.
If you don't run your company like a soccer team or a football team, you'll have a bunch of individuals. And if that's the way your business works, where they're all on individual jobs all the time, which is unrealistic, that's great. But we all have to get on together. I don't want politics within the ranks. We don't have everyone on the same pay structure. We pay for their strengths, but we also pay well above the rate so that guys can work into a job. They're not always. Sometimes they're getting paid more than they possibly should at the time, but they're working into it. Perfect example is I've got one guy. He was just not cutting it. So we sat down and we had a serious chat, and I sort of said, "Do you really want to be an electrician? Do you want to be here?" And from that, a few other phrases or comments were made in there, and from that, I basically gave him more responsibility. And with that, He has stepped up. He's really become a valued employee. Had a report from one of the customers yesterday, and he's doing a fantastic job.
And do you think, you mentioned that maybe you're not spending as much time on the tools and you focus more on the sort of helping to grow the business. And I guess a big part of that is leading the team and mentoring or growing that employee base. Is that a fair representation of how you've approached this?
Yeah, look, what I'm really focused on at the moment. So what I found is I got to a point of growth that I'm at my ceiling. There's only so many hours in the day that I can dedicate. So I've been working around trying to find the best fit to educate me and to help me put some systems in place. And that's where I'm at the moment. Putting those groundwork systems in place, getting the education to improve myself, and learning as employers, learning how to let go and how to pass things down. We always think we are the best at what we do, and no one else can do it. And it's faster if we just do it. But I've been enlightened to a little phrase recently: if you have to do it more than once, create a system.
Right.
It's straightforward.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. I'm doing some education, fairly intense education on how to do that, how best to move forward. Because if I don't, I'm going to burn out. That's what it comes down to, and I don't want to do that. I didn't start a business to burn out. I started a business to, be able to have some freedom with my family and things like that. I've got a boat that I use a couple of times a year. That's it. Motorbike that sits in the shed and does nothing. It'd be nice to do those things. So this is the way I'm trying to get ahead.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people probably listening, I think, have similar ambitions, right? It's not necessarily about how much money you make; it's enabling that lifestyle, which I think is the opportunity that starting a trades business can enable. I'm intrigued. You talked about sort of self-education, and you mentioned a couple of things to me before we jumped on this video. Do you want to maybe talk through the couple of things that you mentioned to me that you're doing and why you picked them and how you're approaching that?
Okay, so as a tradie, these people ring up, or you're in a networking group where someone advises you to get something. Initially, I was contacted by an organisation which specialises in mentoring trades and puts groups of like-minded people together, and it's like a working group. So that's one source of training. So mentoring and being with other guys that have done it before. This is the thing. We're not doing anything new. Sales has been around for thousands of years. Marketing's been around for the same amount of time. We shouldn't think that we're doing anything new. It's just how it's all packaged up and put together for us.
Right.
So I'm very interested in utilising other people's skill to make me better at what I do.
How did you find that? And on that sort of business advisory, which again is I think anyone listening that hasn't done that, it seems to be a common theme that someone finds a local network and then plugs into that. How did you find those people?
Okay, so the first one, they found me, and they cold called me and did the pitch and showed me the offering, and at the end of it showed me the cost. And basically, if it's improving, these programs, they're not cheap, but what you get from them, the shortcuts, the systems, it's a no-brainer. The return on investment is 5-fold minimum. You will pay off this return in the first 6 months. If you don't, you're just not working at it, not doing what their formula is. So that's one I've joined up with, and then there's another one I've joined up, which is a little more expensive, a little more in depth, or a lot more in depth, and it's teaching me how to create systems around business. So right from the top, right from the sale, right through to the admin. Because as you get more people, your job becomes admin. My job has become admin.
Yes.
So, and whether you like it or not, you've got to do it. Safety is a huge part of our business, and if you forget that part, you will lose out. You will have an accident. You will, or one of your guys, of course, will have an accident. So these are all things that we have to get in place, and if you don't do it early, you'll quite often get strung up at the end. Right.
Yeah. No, completely. That makes total sense. And you talk about admin. Do you have someone that supports you on that, or are you doing all the admin and everyone else is on the tools? How's the business sort of structured in that way?
Okay, so yes, I do all the admin. I do have a bookkeeper that does my BAS. We're about to have a chat today to assist me with that. And through a networking organisation I'm with, I'm getting introduced to an organisation which specialises in trades and trade admin. So basically a virtual assistant. And they can be within Australia, they can be overseas, and depending on what you're after, and they can sort of tailor to what you need. So we're investigating that at the moment as well. So there's some talk around that. Being a tradie, we like to know that nothing's been missed in our jobs or our invoicing and things like that. Tradify has been great for me with that, knowing that my guys are now, even if they don't know a part number, they can put it in miscellaneous and make sure that they don't miss an item. So therefore I can then go through and check that those things are being covered off in the job and I'm not losing money basically.
Yeah, no, great. That's good. That's good to hear. And then, one of the other questions I had, which sort of we lead into, and sort of for everyone watching this, one of the things I thought was really intriguing that you've done, and it sort of makes sense now when you talk about your background and thinking about this from a sales perspective, was the QR code that you have on your van. So for listeners, there's a QR code. I think if you scan that QR code as you go past one of your vans, it takes you to an inquiry form. Do you want to maybe just talk through the thinking behind that and how you arrived at doing that?
Okay, so Tradify came up with this basically the inquiry page, which I text that link out to a customer. So instead of me writing it down or stopping the vehicle, writing down their details, I'm on the phone. As soon as I stop, I just text it back to the last number called. I'm not making mistakes. I'm not doing work that I don't need to do. I'm not then going home and then doubling up that,
right,
information input, or having to pay someone else to double up and put that in and make a mistake. So with the inquiry, the first part was I just thought, oh, well, do I put that link on the back of the car? Or then what happened is as COVID came around and QR codes were everywhere. People became quite comfortable with using them. And I thought, oh, well, I'll create a QR code. And then I got my sticker person to make up 10 stickers for me. And I just slapped them on the back of each vehicle. So they're being used by people at traffic lights.
Oh, really? Wow.
People scan it just because they're curious. Oh, where does that go? They've created that, thing. And so when we're also parked in car parks, when we're doing shopping, working on shopping centres or things like that, people go, oh, they're local, grab that. I've possibly got to make another little sticker saying, follow the code to make an inquiry, just with a sort of finger pointing at it. But I thought I was the only one who was doing it, but then I saw, I went on holidays up to North Queensland and there was a tradie van with a big QR code and so I followed it just to see where it went. It was the same thing. It was great. So it's good to see that I'm not the only one thinking about that. But the QR code, it's easy, it's quick. You just jump online, get a QR code creator or an app, and it just creates it for you. It feels like one of those no-brainers that links up you kind of what we would think of as traditional sort of marketing, right? The van and those sort of things, certainly in your local area, and allows it to connect to your systems. Back to your earlier point about, architecting systems that are seamless and removing that double entry and all those things. So it's a really, really great idea. And in terms of the next business card run, just before you go on too much, the next business card run is going to have a QR code on the back.
Right.
So instead of that customer standing there trying to type in a number, they just scan the QR code.
Scan it and they've got you. Yeah. I think it's good to think ahead about those things because it's definitely the way the world is moving. I think you're right. I think one of the things that COVID did was accelerated probably end consumers' comfort with using technology to do certain things which they maybe wouldn't have thought about before, right? And the QR code is a classic example of, a few years ago you needed a QR reader and now you can do it straight from the camera. It's a pretty easy thing to use for anyone. It's pretty basic, so it's cool. And then in terms of business generation, you've got the QR code. You talked about reputation being really, really important. How are you generating most of your business? Is that still predominantly word of mouth?
Yeah, pretty much. A lot of our business is return business. What I'm trying to do outside that is generate more of that business that, like the mums and dads, the people who want fans replaced. Those people, if you have 100 customers that pay you as soon as you've done your job, rather than one customer that pays you monthly or two customers that, and if they fall over, you've got a big hole in your your budget. So my aim is to spread that, and it's more work admin wise, but also there's more profit. There's more profit in changing a fan. There's we don't sell on how much it costs. We sell on how much value the customer's receiving. We sell on a quality product. We don't install second class, or cheap. We don't. And we don't buy at the big multinational corporates. We buy at the wholesalers that support us.
Okay, interesting. And so when you think about those customers, outside of your commercial customers, how are you approaching generating that business? If that's I guess a smaller part of what you do today.
Okay, so Google's one of those things. It's an essential part of everyday business. I've got to get better at doing it, but basically getting reviews, which pushes you up the line, the organic sort of finance. We actually have done really well with Google with the data. People look for data. If you're a data installer as well as an electrician, don't just put in your meta tags electrician, because everyone's looking for electrician. They're not always looking for data. So with COVID, the NBN. Just moving phone lines for people, putting a Wi-Fi hotspot in their house, making their home office seamless. So giving them what they have at work at home. And it's been great. It's very profitable. Quite often the companies who these people work for have been paying for it and they've got no problem paying. So
That's going to be a question I asked you. I've
good.
sort of seen it with EV charging, and I guess one of the other things, I saw that you were doing those types of installations, and I was going to ask you that question. You kind of answered it. I'm presuming there was a massive influx of demand when, we're in, lockdowns. Unfortunately, still in lockdowns in certain areas, but I'm presuming that prompted people to reassess their Wi-Fi and think, oh, actually, I need something different here. It's not working, or multiple people using it at once. Those types of things.
We still try and push people away from like having a Wi-Fi running your desktop. We try and get them on a dedicated hard line because it's just more effective.
Yeah.
And it's safer, more secure. The other thing is Wi-Fi doesn't work through concrete and stuff like that as well as we'd like it. This is always plenty of steel in the way. You can upsell with your kids. Like the kids, what they do, they don't want backyards these days. They want Xbox and fast internet.
Yeah.
So a lot of kids have got that in their bedroom. There's an upsell there. You just talk to them about that. Hey, what if we put an extra data outlet in the kid's bedroom? Smart TVs. Have you got a, and they say, oh, it's Wi-Fi. And I say, well, do you ever get dropouts from Netflix and things like that? Oh, yeah, we do. So, you just talk to them about that and say, well, look, that will get nullified if you put a dedicated cable in there from your modem.
Yeah.
So there's all these little upsells you can do and just see what you'd like in your house and move on from there.
Yeah, and so it's interesting you talked about. Yes, I mean, I think especially when people look at that and look at the overall cost, and that's kind of what I mean. I think if nothing else, it highlighted the importance of connectivity, which you maybe were less precious about when you're only home at the weekend and maybe in the evening. The other thing is you talked about the meta tags, which is having words ultimately on your website that Google can recognize and say, yeah, you specialize in a certain area. Do you have a region in terms of your locality? How far out do you go from sort of Tweed Heads and around the surrounding areas?
So we don't travel that far. Our largest distance really in the Tweed district is probably 50 k's. My focus in my initial business plan, I don't know how many guys out there do business plans. I highly advise it. I had a business plan done sort of my second year of my apprenticeship. I did it at a mature age, but so when I went into business, I followed my business plan. It evolved every year. But if you don't have a plan, you've got nothing to follow. So my plan was to build my business in my local area. I didn't want to travel. I didn't want to be home after 4:30. I didn't want to be stuck in traffic. I didn't want my guys to be stuck in traffic. I want them to have a life too. Yeah. They've all moved to Queensland, but it's okay. But they drive work vehicles home because it's more efficient for them to be straight on the job rather than coming to my place or meeting somewhere and wasting that time. But with the meta tags, that's more handled through Google Maps. You can get your SEO working on that side of things where you're upscaling through that. I think with the meta names and things like that, that's a lot of developers, web page developers don't inform people of the full back end of a web page. A basic, for instance, if you don't have 300 words on your web page, you're not going to rank really well at all. It's one of those things. The more words you have, the more content, the better you're going to rank. And Google really doesn't look at you that much unless you have 300 words on your page. So, and you've got to have those phrases within that wording and that text to actually rank. And they've got to be part of your meta names and meta tags and so on. Finding a good writer is one of the best things I did. Now, my webpage is being redeveloped at the moment. The initial webpage was made fast and quick when I first started, but every 2 to 3 years, an upgrade's not a bad thing. The speed of our technology and our, what we have showing to the world, it's all going so fast. We're already at the Jetsons. Remember the Jetsons when you were growing up? There was all this technology. We're there now.
Of course. How did you find the people to do that work? I mean, that was you sort of, like you said, you had a business plan. I guess part of that business plan was around visibility of your business and the location you wanted to work in. How did you sort of decide on who to you talked about hiring a writer to write that content. What made you, I guess, firstly, what made you do that, and how did you find that person?
Okay, so initially I did it all myself. When you're on your own and you've got heaps of time and you've got all this brain power and creativity, and some of us do have it, some of us don't have it. I find the more I do, the less I have.
Yeah.
But when I initially started out, I had all this vision, and so I wrote all of it myself, and got a friend, really great friend, who was a web developer, to put it together for me. But in saying that, it was a very quick, basic page. There was, I think, 5 tabs to it. With the new one, we've spent a bit more money. We've done our research into what their offering is, how much. Look, I drilled down right into how much they actually know, whether they're just salespeople or whether they actually know what they're doing. And this is the other thing, when we made the decision, everyone's come back and said, oh, you shouldn't have done that, or you shouldn't have done that. So everyone's going to say, I know someone.
Yes.
I've got a better offering, or, which is great. But I made a decision. It's where we're at, what they're offering, what they've shown me on the initial sort of workups is great. I've gone as far down to redevelop my logo a little bit more. I've actually started a second company in Queensland, because we've got the New South Wales part to a point, and then we've branched out into Queensland. We've licensed in Queensland, and we've rebranded under a different name, just to give us some separation. Tweed is a very location-based name.
Yes.
So our other business is less location-based. It's more, we can work anywhere.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, cool. All right, fantastic. And then before we finish up, I guess, is there any one thing that you would recommend? I mean, you talked about business plan, you talked about advisors, and that network. Is there one thing that when you look back, you think gave you that level of success that you would recommend other people do first?
Look, we've all got a vision. Don't just make quick decisions and just go. A couple of things I've learned through my life, and I don't know everything. I'm still learning, which is just a great thing. So that's one thing. Never say I know everything. Never be so arrogant that you think I've got it all sorted, because you don't.
Right. Yeah.
The more you learn, the more you realise you don't know. So that's one thing. Always be ready to learn. Say yes to most things. Not stupid things, but when it comes to doing work and things like that, sometimes it's good just to say yes and throw yourself in the deep end and give it a go. And then on the other side of things, one of my employers years ago was a great guy, still a good friend, and he taught me how to, instead of making that snap decision, he said, the world's not going to end if you don't make a decision today. So go home and sleep on it.
Yeah.
Customers, if they're expecting you to drop everything and come around and do it now, learn to say, steady on, we'll get to it. Because the world's not going to end. We've just got to learn how to placate them and talk them down a little bit, keep that energy lower so that we can actually breathe, instead of us rushing around with our heads cut off. Right.
Yeah.
And
then spreading yourself too thin.
Look, get help. Find people who are willing to help. Like I learned off other people. I didn't learn this myself. I didn't go out and devise all this. Find people like myself. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, get in touch with me. I'll help. I don't mind. I'll give you free information, because it's not me giving away everything I know. It's me helping some other guy get ahead. He's not going to do everything I do, so he's not going to take all my business. Don't worry about that. And the last one, don't worry about the Joneses, be the Joneses. You know what I mean by that? Be that. Don't worry about what your neighbour's doing next door. Be that person out the front where you're leading the way. Safety first, quality jobs. That's it.
Yeah.
We sit there and worry about our neighbours and our opposition the whole time. That's what we'll focus on.
Yeah, of course. I completely agree. I have the very same perspective. Yeah, do the best that you can do within your own company. Yeah, great. Okay, cool. Well, we always finish on a sort of handful of questions. I've really appreciated this. There's some great advice in here, I think, about how you built the business and the journey you've been on. And that sort of learning has been a common theme. I think asking for help from other people that have, and one thing I would reflect on that I think in the trades that is very commonplace is there are people that have sort of been there, done that, and are quite happy to share those stories of what worked and what didn't work. And it's part of the intention behind setting this podcast up, was really to share some of those stories, and hope that people that are sat where you're sat, maybe with the same intention, which is, right, I'm going to go out on my own, I'm going to strive for that 3-day weekend or whatever that looks like, trying to avoid some of those mistakes. So if you weren't doing what you're doing, what other trade would you do?
Oh, look, I've had a long and long history. My last career, I suppose, before electrical and everything to do that, I was an international horse trainer. So I used to break horses in overseas, in Japan, and that was a real passion and a love. But it was if it didn't break your body so much, and give you the opportunity to become wheelchair bound, I'd probably still do that. But it's as my dad said when I was 15, he said, it's not really a good career, son. It doesn't have long-term sort of strategy behind it. So
right.
I didn't listen to dad. I still wanted to do it. So, but you know, that was something else. So it was great. I loved working with animals and people.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then when you are on site, or in the office, what would be your kind of go-to lunch?
Peanut butter sandwich about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Peanut butter, did you say? Yeah. You can't beat peanut butter. Yeah, it's got it all in there. It's good for you. No. And then you go to tool brand. If you picked a brand or just a tool itself, what would you not live without?
Some would say I'm sponsored by Milwaukee. I have Milwaukee everything. It's just red in my shed and in the vehicles, and you know, most of my team actually have gone out and joined the red squad, and they bought the backpacks, and you know, so yeah.
Okay, cool. And then, you know, things are clearly, you know, in Australia, I mean, this sort of timestamps this podcast to some degree, but you know, we're still not out of the woods yet globally by any stretch of the imagination on COVID. But hopefully, when things do start to open up, and I think you're probably slightly more insulated from it where you are today. You know, as things open up, is there a sporting event or a live music event you would say I definitely want to go to first?
Look, we've been so lucky here in Australia. We've had some smart people at the top. We've had some sporting events open up. I was lucky enough mid-COVID to actually catch up with the Australia-New Zealand rugby union, where Australia actually won. I think it was part of the Tri-Nations. We won at Suncorp Stadium. I'd love to get back into going and getting a regular watching the game again. I miss it. But you know, being able to just go out and have a nice meal and not have to worry about, you know, have I got a mask? Have I signed in? Am I, you know, that sort of thing. We've been very lucky at Tweed. Our state government's done a fantastic job with the locking down only small portions rather than creating a huge panic and you know, isolating those zones. Contact tracing has been wonderful in Australia. It's been done really well here. But we're isolated. We have a small population on a very large landmass.
Yes. There's definitely some advantages to that. Yes, in this type of situation. And then last question is, you know, it was great speaking to you. This has been really, really insightful, and I always appreciate people giving up. I know it's a busy time of year. I know you're running around and doing lots of stuff. Who else is there you come across that you think would be a really interesting person for us to talk to that is in the kind of ecosystem, either a tradesperson, or someone that maybe interacts with them?
That's a question out there. I have no idea. It's I don't know. I find that those interesting conversations are few and far between at the moment. This is probably the most interesting conversation I've had in the last few days. But my advice to people is try and find a networking group like a BX networking group, or a BNI or something like that, where you can meet interesting people. But I don't know. Maybe see someone in the building sector, see what they're doing with large scale building. The infrastructure is going crazy here in Australia. You know, how I think what would probably be interesting is maybe going through the process of how some of these smaller guys can work with the larger companies. They're not large themselves, but maybe there's some smaller jobs out there, you know, or getting into a sector that you don't, you know, you may have worked in with a previous employer, but you don't know how to do it now. So some of those building companies that hold the government contracts, whether it be schooling or, you know, government departments, those guys may, it's a hard sector to get into. We sort of lucked into it a couple of times with different people we work for, and you know, one, we've got an insurance builder. That's all they do, insurance work, and it's sporadic, but when it's on, it's on. We just get jobs thrown through.
So, someone else mentioned that actually. It was he was kind of doing large scale kind of heating, cooling systems in Sydney, and he talked about that, actually getting into the mindset of the person. You know, in his example, it's big commercial kind of building owners, about how they're making those decisions, right? How they're deciding which trades they bring in and how they pick them. So yeah, I think that's an interesting topic we should definitely dive into for sure. Cool. Well, Michael, this has been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you giving up the time, because I know you're striving towards that, getting as much time back. So I really appreciate you spending this time to talk to us. It's been really helpful, and good luck. I mean, it's great to hear that the business advisory stuff is working. I had someone on here, you know, a week ago, and he talked about it. He doesn't know what the payback is yet, but I think if he listens to this and hears you sort of saying 5 times payback, that's incredible, and even within 6 months is amazing. So I think if I've taken anything away from this conversation, I think going out there, finding help, and a model to sort of build your business around is a really smart thing to do. So and good to hear that it worked. Yeah.
Look, just on that initial investment, it's just money. What you're getting for yourself is mental knowledge. Knowledge is worth so much more than a piece of paper.
Yeah.
You know, and it may not happen in 6 months. It may take longer, but it will happen if you work at it.
Yeah.
You know, just gather everything you can, put it in your head, and try and get it out on paper.
Yeah. No, keep learning. That's what I've taken from this. I think is really important. I definitely subscribe to that. So Michael, thanks again. Really appreciate it. And to all our listeners, as always, if you've enjoyed this, then please, or if you haven't, give us some feedback. If you haven't enjoyed it, then maybe just send us the feedback privately. But otherwise, if you could give us the 5 stars on Apple and all the rest of it, we really appreciate it. And if you want to join the podcast, if you've got something interesting you want to talk about, then again, we would love to hear from you. So as always, thanks for listening or viewing, and we shall see you soon. See you next time. Cheers. Bye.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Behind the Tools is brought to you by Tradify, job management software for your trade business. If you enjoyed the podcast, let us know by leaving a review, and be sure to tell your mates about it. Email behindthetools@tradifyhq.com if you or someone you know would be keen to join the show as a guest.